Hello, everybody. I'm gonna just sit here for a minute and let people join. And in case you don't know who I am, my name is Dia Dynasty. I am one half of La Maison de Rouge. Great. So today I'm going to talk about slave training. I'm not actually going to do any slave training here because that is a very in-depth process that demands a lot of face time as well as assessments in real life. And so I'm just going to talk about it. And so the other half of La Maison de Rouge is Lucy Sweetkill. She is on holiday right now. So welcome to our Periscope. We broadcast every Monday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And hi, Jen. I'm really glad to see all of you tuning in. I know that slave training is kind of like an elusive topic for a lot of people because it's so different for everybody. And in fact, it's different just between Lucy and I. We have a lot of shared values and things that we like for our slaves to do that are similar, but we also have some differences. And I think that yes. So I think that the major difference in slave training is always up to the dominant and what their values and their philosophies are. I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I'm easily distracted, and I have some things that I'd like to say and educate you guys and elucidate on, but maybe hold your questions until the very end. And if you have a question pertaining to something that I'm saying, and I happen to answer it, then wonderful. But if you have a question that I haven't answered at the very end, then please maybe write it down so you'll remember. I would love to answer all of your questions, and I would love to have the time to do that, but I don't want to keep getting sidetracked, and the more I get sidetracked, the longer it's going to take. So I appreciate all of you being so polite and considerate. And so I'll begin with saying that slave training is actually a lot of work. Some people might think of it as a very fantastic way to gain help or assistance in our lives as dominants. And yes, that is the idea, is that we are basically bringing people into our lives that can help us make our lives a lot easier. But there's a lot of intricacies and a lot of preferences and ways of doing things that slave training entails. That is a lot of work. It's like kind of part mothering and part school teachering, and then part some other things that don't really have a label. And so I have recently come from yoga teacher training. And that is another form of training, of course. And so yoga teacher training is about 2.5 weeks of learning about yoga in all its forms. And yoga is not just an exercise that you do on the mat with your body. It's a way of life. It is an all-inclusive philosophy on how to interact with your surroundings, how to relate to yourself, as well as thinking about the more philosophical ways of how to approach life, as well as even just simple things like what you eat and how you keep yourself clean, how you keep your space clean, and very simple embodied ideas as well. And so I learned that in yoga teacher training, there's a lot of ideas that can be presented within slave training. And I think that those are worth sharing. especially if somebody wants to find balance in their lives. And so my criteria for slave training is that somebody who is interested in being my slave can come and see me in a session where they are submissive to me. And that is step one. And there is no other step one. The only way to get to see me is to book a session. And so there you have step one. And then from there on out, I can actually assess you and all your qualities and all your skills and all your shortcomings, perhaps, or, you know, whatever it is that you are as a person. The goal for my slaves to become worthy of being called Dia's slave is a sense of balance and a good sense of self. And balance is so many things. Like, it's not just, you know, balancing work and play. It's balancing inner and outer life. It's balancing your spiritual life with your physical life. It's balancing all kinds of different things that you may not even think about on the regular. And so there's just so much that goes into slave training that I think that that a lot of people don't see that as a realistic way of being in the world. It's just kind of like a fantasy to a lot of people. And I think that there are definitely elements of fantasy that can be woven into it. And I think that that's actually really important, is that everybody receives something beneficial to what they're looking for in life, and that they fully embrace the things that they are hoping to receive out of a relationship, because eventually it's a relationship. And so there's, you know, it becomes a relationship where each person is benefiting the other person in some way. And I appreciate all of you, I guess, like, trying to get rid of the trolls. And it's really nice to be able to, I guess, take somebody in and to share with them my own philosophies about my beliefs and the things that I would want a slave to embody, because sometimes it changes the perspectives or broadens perspectives, and it allows other people to see things from, you know, different points of view, because I'm sure not everybody has lived my life, and it would be interesting to, you know, kind of understand who you are serving in that way that you are devoting yourself to. So one of the wow, these people are really annoying. One of the ways that I find slave training to be very, I guess, transformational is that you're creating a safe space for somebody, and and they can be exactly what they are, what they know themselves to be, and then a lot of times they don't always know exactly what they are yet, because they haven't really explored this this like persona or this part of themselves. And so allowing somebody who's looking to be trained as a slave to find themselves in that way and to go deeper within themselves, in my opinion, is one of the most rewarding things. And a lot of times we hold things within ourselves because they don't fit into social norms or gender roles or expected behaviors of whatever label you've been given or whatever label you've given yourself. And that's why I think BDSM is so liberating, because there are there are just so many people here that don't fit the norm. And this is a safe space for all the people that are looking to explore that part of themselves. And I think that as a dominant, it's important to be the guide, and it's also important to take into consideration who this person is looking to be, because when a person comes in and they're submissive, it's easy to get lost in that submission of who you're submitting to. Sometimes I think some people are looking for an escape, and in my opinion, slave training is very much about bringing that person back to themselves and getting them in touch with their own body and their own thoughts and their own values and their own self. And so all of these resources can be very, I guess, rich for the person who is looking to be trained as a slave. So it looks like there's a lot of trolls. I wonder why. And they're just, you guys are like saying really ugly things. You must have a lot of ugliness in you, and I'm really sorry about that. But saying ugly things to me isn't really gonna like help you. It's just gonna make you look uglier. And so if you guys don't like what I'm saying, maybe you can leave, because you're just messing it up for everybody else. And, you know, clearly all these people are trying to get rid of you too. So anyway, right now I'm open to take some questions, and if anybody has any questions about slave training, I'm totally open to answer them. But if not, I'll just keep going a little further with my philosophies. Okay, and can you block the troll? Let's see if I can block the troll. It doesn't look like it. I don't know if I can block them if they haven't shown themselves by liking. So for long distance training, that's a really good question. I have tried long distance training, and sometimes, and then how do we differ? Okay. I'm just gonna write that down and answer it in a moment. Okay, I'm sorry you found an online mistress that blackmails you, but you should always do your research when you're looking for somebody to submit to. And then slave training, of course, is the next level of, I guess, ownership or play. So distance training can be difficult because obviously you guys are not in the same place, and sometimes there's the time difference. Sometimes there's just life getting in the way. And so I've tried it with a submissive on the other side of the world, and it was very difficult because of our time differences, and also he was in maybe not such a great place, and so he failed to show up just kind of on social media. Wow. How do I block this person? Block user. There we go. Yes. Okay. So I believe I've blocked that person. Okay, so slow down on the questions. Hold on. See fetishes long term. Yes. And then, let's see. Okay, shared. Okay. Right. Pain Puppy is a great example of success, but he's not my slave. I'm just trying to write down these questions so that I can answer them all later. In particular, Drew. What happened to the questions? So just to finish answering the long distance thing, it really depends on the intention of each person. Some mistresses are not interested in slave training at all, and some are, but only with certain parameters, of course. And hurry up and buy, and you get blocked. Okay. So the way that Lucy and I differ in our slave training is, I think that I might be a little more friendly, and that can be misleading for some people. I don't mean to be misleading. I'm just a very friendly person. It's difficult for me to kind of to be cold, and she's really good at that, and it's very effective for what she does. And I don't think that she's cold. She's just better at kind of making things very, very clear without any sort of sugarcoating. And I don't always, like, sometimes I do a little sugarcoating, and sometimes I'm just very appreciative and thankful, and I have a lot of gratitude and appreciation for my slaves that I constantly express, because to me, the DS dynamic is not about, and not that this is how it is for Lucy, but I can only talk about me. To me, the DS dynamic is simply something that happens in the relationship as a way of power play, but it's not it's not a way of like being mean or being unkind or being like irritable or anything like that with my slaves. If I'm irritated with somebody, then I probably would first ask myself, like, why am I irritated? Is it because I'm hangry? Is it because I'm having a bad day? Or did they actually do something that was intentionally irritating to me, just to get my attention? Because some people will do that. And so, yeah, I guess that's one of the ways. She has a very embodied and kind of like almost like health coach or life coach approach to things, which I think is very effective for people who are not as spiritual or philosophical as I am. And I have a more cerebral approach. And I do tend to talk a lot about, like philosophical things. And so I think that's another way that we differ. Somebody asked about long-term, seeing fetishists long-term. Just to answer that question really quick, no, I have not trained any of my slaves to be in SM relationships with other people. That may be coming up next. So yes, I actually do. I very happily see a long-term fetishists long-term. And yes, this is the question that I'm addressing right now. If a fetishist is willing to submit to you during sessions but does not want to become my slave, that is actually a very good point, because not all fetishists are submissive. Or have that emotional need to submit. Like, they may be submissive for an hour or two in a session because that is the dynamic that I require, but fetishists aren't looking for the need of submission to fulfill any sort of deep emotional craving. And so I have a fetishist that I've been seeing for at least 6 years, and he and I are, we're very friendly, and sometimes we'll go do weird things together, like go see some play, or go shoe shopping or whatever, because that's one of his fetishes. But I don't make him like get down on his knees and kiss my feet out in public, because he's not submissive. And so knowing that distinction is really important for longevity. So Lucy and I actually do have a shared slave right now, and I believe he is present, and his name is Big Baby G, and he's been really great. Training him has been very interesting, because I get to see the ways that Lucy deals with it, and then the way that I deal with it, and sometimes they feed off of each other. We see him once a month in session, and and then so we have different tasks for him. And so I think one of the tasks that Lucy and I enjoy sharing is the recommendation of certain books to expand certain ideas about philosophies that we have. I believe that she recommended a book by a Vietnamese Buddhist monk named Thich Nhat Hanh, and he simplifies a lot of philosophies into very embodied and practical ways. And then I recommended a book called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, and this book is about kind of social contracts that you have with yourself when dealing with other people. And there's 4 main agreements, and I think that they're applicable to basically anybody living in life, dealing with other people on any sort of basis. And those are, first of all, don't take anything personally. And so that was definitely exercised in earlier when those trolls were here, and they were, calling me names and saying things about me. And I can't take that kind of thing personally, because first of all, I don't believe that I'm ugly or that I sound like a chicken. But also, nothing that other people say really has anything to do with you. It has a lot to do with themselves and what's going on in their heads. So that's a really important thing to remember. Yes, they were. And then, how do they relate to the subject? They relate to the subject in a more expansive way of slave training being that a slave, somebody who deserves to be called my slave, has to have a sense of self that I can be proud of. So that's many things. Some of the other agreements are always do your best, be impeccable with your word, and oh look, another troll. Be impeccable with your word. Big Baby G, what's the last one? Don't take anything personally. Be impeccable with your word. Always do your best. And I'm waiting. Make no assumptions. Yes, okay. Thank you. I'm glad to know you're paying attention, Big Baby G. So there is, yes. Okay. I will answer that question momentarily about white people and slave, the term slave. No, I have not been to the Master Slave Conference, that just wrapped up in DC. Okay, so the next question that was asked is about slave training versus real-time sessions. And let's see, who else has inspired your... Okay. All right, so I'm definitely going to get to all these questions. So slave training versus real-time sessions is, again, the first impression that you will ever make on me is booking a session and coming to play with me. And I don't always decide at that moment whether you are fit for slave training or not. I think it's really important to just kind of lightheartedly play and have a good time and be kinky and, you know, be adults. Hi. And I think that the willingness for a submissive to let go in that situation is also really important. And so during that, you know, I'm just kind of taking it at face value during our session. If there is slave training to follow, I think it's really important for there to be a discussion and to talk about intentions and to talk about realistic expectations. And so a session can happen all the time, over time, with no slave training ever being discussed. Slave training is definitely like the next level in devotion. So that is what the difference is. I knew that somebody was going to ask about the terminology. Yes, I'm a professional dominatrix of slave, especially with white people using it. I think that there's definitely areas of concern, especially right now where everybody is trying to be so PC and like not trying to offend anybody and trying to be inclusive in everything that they say, you know, gender pronouns and calling people non-binary. And I think that that's really important because language is what we use to communicate, and it's the only thing that we have to express ideas in a widespread way. Not everybody's going to understand symbols or pictures or anything like that. And so it's the clearest way that we have to communicate, which again is why the agreement of being impeccable with your word is so important. But you know, I feel like there's a lot to unpack with the whole slave thing. I'm really not very deeply steeped in this tradition or in this custom of using the word slave. It is something in the BDSM community that is pretty much agreed upon as far as the lexicon goes. But I do also use the word devotee, and I find that for some people, even if they're not people of color, the word slave can be very triggering. And so that's another thing that I think people should discuss among themselves. And until that discussion comes up, then we just use the agreed upon vocabulary that we've been kind of set in for traditional BDSM. And then who inspired my philosophy? One of my major inspirations is Carl Jung, and the way that he writes is a little cryptic and dense sometimes. And so I think that a lot of people have kind of synthesized and simplified a lot of his ideas. To be a fetish. Not really sure what that means. Can you clarify? Carl Jung. So his last name is spelled Jung. His full name is Carl Gustav Jung. And he was a psychoanalyst who was a peer of Sigmund Freud. And I believe they had some overlapping philosophies that agreed and then some that disagreed and eventually split ways. And Carl Jung references a lot of mysticism and also talks about archetypes and also female and male archetypes that I think have a lot of symbolism involved in them, and I'm a big fan of symbols. So Carl Jung is one of them. I'm also a big fan of basically Vedic philosophy. I think that some of it is pretty ancient and maybe even a little bit patriarchal, and that, you know, this was thousands of years ago, and I understand that men and women may be related to each other differently. Okay, so I just need you guys to slow down on the questions while I answer this, because I'm gonna come back to all of this and scroll through all your questions, but these questions are very thoughtful and they require quite a bit of thought also. I was talking about yogic philosophy, and like I mentioned earlier, I just come back from yoga teacher training where I learned a lot about yoga philosophies, and there's no like set author. There is a person by the name of BKS Iyengar who basically brought yoga to to the masses by writing books and crystallizing a lot of these philosophies into texts that we can read in different languages. And so that's right now, that's kind of my biggest focus is yogic philosophy. And just to share one with you, there are 4 forms of yoga. And so again, yoga is not something that we just do with our bodies on a yoga mat, although it is one of them. One of the forms of yoga is called karma. Karma yoga is yoga of service. And so service being anything that maybe you find fulfillment and joy in doing for others. And it's not something that you do for money, and it's not really necessarily anything that you do to get something back. It is selfless. It is for the community. One of the things that I do as karma yoga is Reiki. I offer healing with my hands. And I don't charge for it, and I don't expect anybody to give me anything back for it. It's just my way of offering something to the world and serving any way that I can, which does not make me submissive. So another form of yoga is called Bhakti Yoga, and that is the yoga of devotion. And it's not necessarily having a religion or having to have faith. It's being devoted to something outside of yourself. For example, it could be something as simple as being devoted to your cat. And also, you know, the little things that you might do for your cat that that you're sure are not going to be reciprocated, but it is because of the love and devotion that you feel for this animal that you do these things. Another form of yoga is called jnana. And that is the acquisition of knowledge and or science, and to be practiced with humility in that you are learning about things and you're sharing knowledge, but you're not putting yourself on a pedestal as some kind of guru. So that is one form of yoga. And then the last form of yoga is called Raja, and that's it's called the Royal Road of Yoga. And that kind of, there's a lot more philosophy behind Raja Yoga. There's in fact 8 paths of yoga, and a lot of those are very in-depth. One of them has to do with asana, which is the yoga that you do on the mat. And then others have to do with words in Sanskrit that you probably, you know, won't really understand. But they have to do with ways that we deal with ourselves, observances and interactions that we have with ourselves, as well as interactions and restraints that we have with the world, as well as healthy food, yes, as well as breath work, like how we control our breath and how we connect to our bodies through the breath, and a lot of studying and understanding our place in the world, and being humble. And so that's let's see. Okay, I'm gonna scroll back to some of these questions, some of these very, very thoughtful questions that I was not able to answer. Let's see. What % of married men do this with you? Okay. That's a good question. I think it differs, of course, from person to person, from mistress to mistress. I would say that 40 to 50% of my clients are married men. Some of them were married and then are divorced. Some of them are currently married or newly married. Some of them have permission from their wives. Some of them do not tell their wives. And that really, that's not my area of concern. I don't do anything that I would feel bad about with these clients. I think it's really interesting because technically I'm a sex worker, and what I provide is a very specialized service. And a lot of people might perceive this as, oh, the man is cheating on his wife with you. Yes, that is definitely one perspective. Another perspective is that the man who's married may not be able to receive this kind of interaction with his wife because maybe she's not interested. And another perspective is that a man may not be able to share this side of him with his wife because what they have is a power dynamic that's already been established, and showing him or showing her this other side of him may somehow destroy or compromise their current power dynamic. So there's a lot of other reasons that can be up for discussion, but that's just one of the answers. Let's see. Does following be impeccable with your words at all times make it difficult to be fetish? I don't really know how to answer that, so I'm gonna skip it. Would you share what success in coloring looks like? Branding, tattoo, epic transformation. Okay, so coloring is a term that is used in the BDSM community to depict ownership. And that usually comes with a DS dynamic that is closed. So it means that the dominant and the submissive are not necessarily exclusive, but they are enmeshed in a relationship where the submissive and the dominant remain that way in their relationship. And success looks like a lot of different things. Branding, tattoo. I mean, I've had a submissive tattooed, but he wasn't collared. It was just what he wanted to do. And then branding is something that I've been discussing with Lucy and I's joint slave, and I've never done that as well. And so it looks like many different things depending on the intentions of each party. Can you have 2 or more slaves, i.e. devotees, at the same place and time? Yes, you can. I have several slaves. Not all of them live in New York City, but the ones that do run tasks for me. And then every once in a while, there will be an event where I can bring more than one slave with me. And sometimes, everything lines up and it's a great fun party. And then sometimes I find that there are definitely slaves who act weird around other slaves, and I think that that's from a lack of exposure and community, but also some people, they have this idea that they want to be the only one, and that can make things really difficult. I try to groom that attitude out of my slaves, because at some point they're probably all going to meet and they may all just have to hold hands. So the idea is to have everybody be good with each other. Are you sure you're not your cat's slave? No, I'm not sure. Carl Jung, yoga, okay. Train a Dom to be a sub. Can you train a Dom to be a sub? I don't know. I'm gonna skip that. Does it take the fun away if one is always says or uses words that are PC? Yes, it does. But then again, that's what we create safe spaces for, because I try to be as non-confrontational with my language as possible. There's no reason for me to try to get you mad at me. Let's see. Okay, can power dynamics ever successfully change? I'm sure they can. I don't have any experience in that realm, so I couldn't really answer that fully. Let's see. Percentage of your slaves for orgasm control and what types? Okay. So I have a chastity slave in Florida who has been in chastity for over 600 days, and I did not let him out very much. He also has different needs. He's in a different part of life. But recently we've taken his chastity off for health reasons. And so when I put the chastity device back on, I think we're going to renegotiate some kind of schedule where there's a healthy amount of release. And then Lucy and I share a slave, Big Baby G, and so he is also in a chastity cage, and he gets to do little tasks for us because he's not in New York City. And so whenever he does something right, then we give him a few hours or a day of release. And then as far as orgasm control in a direct way, that is definitely something that I find to be very fascinating, whether it's in session or out. And I think that removing orgasm from basically a sexual interaction trains the sub to not seek the orgasm as kind of the peak moment. And so that pleasure can come in a lot of different ways when it's not focused on just orgasm. Because that can be, that seems to be how a lot of people are trained, like vanilla and otherwise. And I find it kind of boring. So, are most of your clients wealthy white men? Most of my clients are men. I do have a couple of female submissives that I'm very, very fond of. And yes, many of them are white, but I also have people of color. I would say the percentage is like 80-20. And I don't know about wealthy. I try not to get too deep into other people's finances because that's not really my business. But I don't do financial domination unethically if that's going to be coming up next. In a devotee relationship, do you control all aspects of daily life? No, I don't, because that would be exhausting for me. And seeing as how I own a few slaves, trying to put them on some sort of schedule with regard to their other lives is way more work than I want to do. Okay, curious about what drew your slaves to you for training. What did they know? Okay, so Gilligan. That would be something you might want to ask my slaves, one of which is on here. And he can answer for you what drew him to me. He wasn't specifically drawn to just me. He was drawn to both Lucy and myself. And I think, if I may speak for him in a general way, Lucy and I present ourselves as educators as well as people who give a lot of thought into what we do. We don't just like show up and swing a whip and, whatever. We really, really take pride in our craft. And we care a lot about educating the public about what we do because we find it to be very liberating. We find it to be healing. We find it to be super transformative in so many different ways that we want to share this gift. And no, we don't mean share it as in like give it away for free, but we do the periscopes where we talk about all this stuff forever and ever. And so that might be one of the reasons. So yes, I have an Instagram. It is Dia, D-I-A, 2_ Dynasty, D-Y-N-A-S-T-Y. You feel as if you're a hybrid, Dom and sub. Okay, so Dwayne, maybe you're a switch. I don't know. just a thought. Okay, any tips on how one can practice to be thyself? That's a good question. That's a good question, Dusty Foot Philos. I have a lot of tips. I think the number one tip is to really disconnect from all social media. Maybe for like 3 days and go inward. Whether it's, sitting around daydreaming, maybe going to a library and finding something that draws you to it or that calls out to you. Think about what you really are passionate about, and as well as using your thoughts to do that, using your brain to do that, use your heart. Sometimes we think about something and we feel some kind of feeling in our chest. Sometimes, if we think about something sad, it's like a crushing feeling or a squeezing feeling. And other times we think about something really happy and our whole face lights up and our chest opens and there's this like warmth radiating from us. So get in touch with that part of yourself, Dusty, and see if there's something that speaks to you, because whatever it is that you're seeking is within you, and you most likely have whatever answer it is that you need in you already, maybe buried amongst mounds of social media fodder and troll talk. So clear that stuff away, and maybe even I wouldn't recommend meditation, because meditation is just really, really hard. So yeah, that's a tip. Okay, are your devotees required to sign a contract with you? No, they're not. I think that contractual agreements can be general, but are also constantly shifting and evolving depending on what's really going on. I think a verbal agreement is enough. And I also think that if you are interacting through email or text messaging, that being able to refer to something in the written word is helpful, which is, I think, why contracts were made. But I feel like the contract is, it can be useful, and I think that it can be useful for a lot of people who need that, who need it to be written down in black and white, but I don't require that. So what's a switch? Okay. Dwayne, a switch is somebody who has desires to dominate and also to submit. And they could be uneven in their ratios of desire. They could also be 50-50. And then there's a lot of other terminology that kind of is tangential to what kind of switch you are and stuff like that. So I believe there's a website that has a quiz that you can take. Let me find it for you real quick. Let's see. So there's a quiz called if you Google how kinky are you, quiz. The first thing that comes up is a magic quiz. And yeah, I don't really know that I don't think that that's going to help you out. Yeah, I think it's really up to personal exploration, Dwayne. A switch is somebody who, like you said earlier, embodies both dominant and submissive tendencies, and it could be really informative to experience both sides. Big Baby G has lots of really wonderful words to say. Thank you. Okay. Dusty. Oh, you're so welcome. And you've already read all the books. And, any good ideas for slave training? Good reading ideas. Well, one of the books that I recommended for Big Baby G, one of my slaves, is called The Four Agreements. I find that to be super useful and helpful in many ways, not just slave training, but also just in daily life. And I would recommend that book. It is by Don Miguel Ruiz, and it is called The Four Agreements. Do I mark my personal slaves? Not yet. I usually prefer some sort of little trinket, like a collar or a cuff or something, but the truth is, a lot of slaves, have normal daily lives where they have to go into some sort of public environment and earn money. And so wearing a collar is usually out of the question. But some little mark, I have one of my slaves, had one of my slaves tattooed with my logo. And he's the only one that's been actually marked in that way. And he's also got a tattoo of me, like in my likeness, which is really interesting to have. But it's not a requirement, it's definitely up to our negotiations to determine what is appropriate, and sometimes nothing is appropriate. You don't need a quiz, you know who you are. Okay, great. Do you like to leak your feet? What behavior in a slave pleases you most over time? I enjoy slaves that actually are able to balance things in their lives. So balancing their devotion to me as well as their own lives, whatever that is that makes them happy, that makes them feel like they're growing in some way, whether it be a hobby or a new skill, that in and of itself is devotional to me, because it means that you value yourself and that you want to keep growing and becoming better as a slave to me. Let's see. Cognitive therapy books because of how it relates to the Four Agreements. No. Cognitive therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT. I have a book that I've been meaning to read, and I have about 1 million books that I've been meaning to read, and it's called How the Brain Changes Itself. And I believe that's more in line with the idea of neuroplasticity, but I think that cognitive therapy is essentially slave training. In a lot of ways, there's the idea that you are comprehending everything that you do as a form of learning. And so by behaving this way, you're creating new neural pathways for your own behavior. And that behavior can be, of course, utilized outside of the kink realm. And I think that those are really fascinating ideas. And if you have any recommendations, Week for Goddess, I would happily take them. Do geishas play dom role, you think? Dusty, I don't know any geishas, but that would be an interesting thing to ask a geisha. Let's see. Question. What would you seek in a slave at this moment? Okay, this answer is going to melt my feed, but I'm interested in the idea of a sex slave, and I'm just going to leave that there. What can someone who is not your slave do for you? Well, Man Peach, I have a slave, or I have a submissive, or let's call him a devotee, because he's not a slave. He writes poems to me every month, and I get to see his progress in visual and literary creativity. And that to me is something that expresses to me his willingness to keep growing in a creative way. So, Dr. Joe, let me write that down. Dr. Joe S. P. Enza. Okay. CBT. All right. What if you are very sexually attracted to your male slave? Doesn't that change the dynamic? No, because females are able to control their sexual urges in a way where we are prioritizing our professionalism. And like I said earlier, I was interested in a sex slave. And so I don't even know what that really looks like right now, and I've been thinking a lot about it. But no, it still wouldn't change the dynamic. I mean, he would be, whoever he is, he would be like, you know, at my beck and call. I would use him however I wanted to, and it wouldn't be about his pleasure. But hopefully he would receive pleasure from just being my sex slave. Okay, I had a dom once burn a D in my arm. Okay, cool. What does it cost to be a slave? I don't know. That's a good question. So I can only speak on me and my process of acquiring slaves. The very first thing that you have to do is come in to have a session with me. And so at least it would cost my tribute. Okay. All right, so does that mean to be used by others or by you? That's still to be determined. And I think I finally caught up with all the questions. So as far as, I guess, you're referring to a sex slave, it would just be me for right now. And then if I felt like it, I would, you know, maybe train him to be shared by others. Would your sex slave need to be of a specific gender? Absolutely not. I am queer, and even though I'm in a heteronormative partnership, I'm very much interested in, do you like a femme or a sissy or whatever? Yeah, whatever, you know. It doesn't matter, but I do find that whenever I have a session with somebody that is interested in being my sissy slave or my sissy maid, then I'm so much nicer to her, especially if she embodies female qualities that she's able to maintain, like her voice and her walk. Okay, so would you prefer a male masculine slave or a feminine slave? You know, it really just depends on the person. If the male slave is very masculine but very qualified, then I would prefer for him to remain that way. I'm not looking to emasculate somebody who's not into it. And then feminine slaves, you know, if it's a male who is who identifies more on the female or on the feminine spectrum, or or female who identifies on the feminine spectrum, or a female who identifies on the masculine spectrum. Any of those are fine with me. It's really about the qualities that they embody and their intentions for being trained as a slave. So, a clown sex slave, that sounds like the ideal kind of sex slave. So, thank you for bringing that up. Opinion on dominants who want to enter the world the moment they turn 18. So I don't really have an opinion because I don't really know their intentions. But I do encourage anybody who's looking to get into the BDSM world who's of age to do a lot of research. Find the people that have words and writings and philosophies and whatever that resonate with how you, I guess, live your life. And if you're so young that you don't really know how you live your life, then maybe listen to the feelings inside of you, inside your gut and inside your chest, if there's some sort of draw to somebody in particular that you would like to try to learn more about, and, you know, read their writings, do your research, learn all you can, by going to munches, by participating at parties, maybe play parties, and see where you're at first, and what kind of dominant you would like to be. I think that's really important, is that sometimes we try to emulate somebody else because we think that they are cool or have a lot of followers or whatever. We like their look. But we need to really embody who we are as dominants, and really find out, you know, what our style will be and what we care about, and that will attract the right kind of submissive to you. So, it is now 1 hour and 1 minute, and I've talked so much. And I really appreciate all of you guys who have been so polite and trying to get the trolls out of here and asking me very, very thoughtful questions. Thanks, Phillies. And where do you see your tribute again? You can go to my website, and that would be dominadynasty.com, and you can fill out a submission form if you would like to ask me more questions. Thank you guys all for being so patient and asking such thoughtful questions, and again, being very well-mannered and appreciative of what I'm offering here. And so I have an Instagram, and I don't really post a lot of stuff, but if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm Dia, D-I-A _ Dynasty. I'm also on Twitter as Domina Dynasty. And we also have, Lucy and I have this wonderful brand called La Maison de Rouge, which is what you're tuning into right now. Our website is La Maison du Rouge, LAMAISON DUROUGE.com. And you can find all kinds of informative, entertaining, and educational articles on there, as well as erotic fiction. And we have an events calendar, and there's also links to our personal websites, or, you know, our professional websites, our individual websites. And La Maison de Rouge all across the board for Twitter, Instagram as well. And again, thank you again. And hopefully we'll see you next week on Monday. Goodbye.